Well, just kind of keep waiting for people to get in here. I got to figure out a good way to do this because I'm not used to using Zoom. So I've got to be able to see everybody here and see what's going on. There we go. That works better for me.
I apologize beforehand if you hear any barking. My
It's
puppy, yeah, she just found a toy right now.
no worries. James Walbridge, you have a deal that's going on, don't you?
I am under LOI officially.
How's it feel?
And it was a battle to get under LOI with this guy. Um, he I'm the second buyer, so I'm sloppy seconds. He was originally under LOI for like 18 million. I'm not under an LOI for 18 million. Um, but basically they had a huge COVID bump and have come back to reality. It's an e-commerce business. The thing that I'm running into now that I'm going to have a question for Alejandra is once you have the quality of earnings or retrading the deal basically how the hell does that, it's like I don't want to blow the thing up, but at the same time I can already see there's going to be I mean a meaningful change, right, in what was represented versus what actually is going to be after the quality of earnings. So I'm not sure how to go about that. So I guess maybe she has a perspective on that end from the other side, representing the
Yeah,
seller.
I'm sure she will. And that's the nature of the deal. It's one of those things now as we're starting to move forward and we're getting beyond these bizarre COVID years because they were, all of you guys looking at financials, you see that and you see a lot of these people that had spectacular years during COVID, or it doesn't even have to be years, it can be a year. And suddenly that's my valuation. I've had this business for 27 years. We've always been somewhere around three quarters to 900,000 in SDE. And then in 2020 or 2021, we did 1.7. And that's what my business is worth now, 1.7. That's multiple. It's like, so based on what? One bizarre year that the world was in lockdown? I mean, yeah,
With
I
all
don't
the
think
free
so.
money and historically low
Yeah,
interest rates and student debt is on complete standby. And
yeah.
so, yeah, for sure.
When you can't blame people for trying. I mean,
I would try. I mean, if I'm
yeah, right?
if I'm the seller, it's like I'm with you. Give me as much money as possible.
Yeah. You never know who's looking out there, who's shopping. Maybe you got people that are looking to pick up a business with more money than sense. And if I'm a seller, I'm hoping that's what I've got, maybe, right?
More
Although
dollars
again,
and
those are
cents.
things that we talk about as well too. That's one of the things that we really try to press in our ecosystem is making sure sellers understand that it's not necessarily the buyer that pays the most money. It's also going to have to be the buyer that takes care of this business, right? Because for many of them, this is their baby. They can talk about money early on, and it is obviously it's important. That's what they want to see. They want to cash out of this, but at the same point, this is family to many of them. And once they start realizing the effect of them leaving and who's going to steward this business going forward, that's where a different dynamic comes into place. And that's an opportunity to present yourself always as the right buyer. We talk about this a lot with private equity. The private equity, particularly in this space, usually doesn't succeed. I mean, they have a very difficult time and they turn over a lot of employees because they typically have a playbook, right? So, making sure that sellers understand that is important. It allows you to align yourself with something that's beyond the dollars and cents.
Yeah. I personally know a case of a lady who was selling her business and he got a very good offer and she was like, I don't like this buyer. So she didn't accept it and she continued like 2 more years until she was able to sell the business to someone that she thought it was the right buyer.
That makes perfect sense. Well, it looks like we've got a pretty good group on here now, and what do we have? It's time now. We've got 5 after, so I think we can kind of start. So I'm not Ty. Uh, if any of you haven't noticed already, Ty started the meeting, but he has sick children right now he is dealing with. So I jumped on at the last minute to kind of help facilitate this. I've got some sock bucket tricks I'm going to do here in a little bit, if anybody's interested in that, because I didn't know what else I was supposed to do. Actually, I'm just pretty much going to leave it to Allie. We asked Allie to come on the other day because she has a wealth of experience. She actually leads the deal coordinator. She is our deal coordinator with the M&A team. So if you're dealing with the Accelerator Plus program, she is the individual that is looking over all of the deals that our team identifies as potentials. She's asking front level diligence questions. She's communicating with brokers. She's communicating with sellers, and she's trying to get deals under LOI. She's got 10 years of experience in the Main Street business brokerage world before she came to us, and we're just very happy she's here. I know when I see questions come across to the executive team on diligence, she typically nails everything that I would have a question on. So it's awfully nice to see that. But we thought we'd have her on because this is a great example to talk to a broker, right? And also to talk to somebody that works in our ecosystem now, so she can kind of see both sides of it. So kind of with that, I'll let Ali do a bit of a intro for herself, and then she's going to kind of open it up to give a little this and that, and you guys for sure just start asking questions, and I'm going to figure out how I can kind of monitor those, and I'll ask some of those as they show up. So with that, Ali, have at it.
Thanks, Brian. I mean, not much that I can add to that, to be quite honest. But yes, my name is Ali Barrera. I live in Miami, Florida. I've been a broker. Well, I graduated college for my BA 2014, and I had 3 job offers, and suddenly I found out what a business broker was, and I denied all those 3 job offers and went and wanted to become a business broker. In Miami, there's like a unique phenomenon where a lot of foreign buyers would buy a business for their investor visa. So there was an influx of buyers. Obviously, I didn't know any business owners straight out of college. So usually they tell you that you as a business broker you sold your first business in a year. I was able to sell it was a very small auto repair shop, I remember, in a very unique area of the city. I sold it in 3 months because I brought a buyer that was looking for their visa, basically. After that, I've sold any type of business on Main Street, hair salon, gas station, uh, advertising agency. I mean, anything with tiles, just whatever you can think of, I've sold it that you can see on Main Street. Just with in being in the game for so long, obviously I started being contacted by business owners that want to sell they wanted me to represent their business, and it was kind of went into like a very niche industry, which was construction. Particularly, I was selling construction businesses that dealt a lot with government, just with government bids. So that's why I kind of understand. I mean, with Acquira, we look at mostly service industry. So that's what's helped me understand a bit and be able to do those due diligence questions that I do now. With Acquira, that's basically what I do. We'll have like an influx of listings that will come in, and it's nothing. Obviously, we do have an off market that we're working on, but I work mostly on the on market. With the off market, my support there is mostly in negotiating LOIs. But with on market, what I do is I'll review kind of the deals that come in weekly, which you can imagine we're doing nationwide, so there's a lot. And from those, I'll try to pick and choose the ones that I think would align most with our AEs, and just the ones that I think have a business that's been like a legacy business since 1957. That's definitely a business that we want to look at, compared to a business that's been established for 5 years. Aside from afterwards, I'll review SIM Gloria kind of mentioned, when you see a sim with years or with financials that they trend up and down, that's definitely a deal breaker. We're not here to, we like the same trend. We're not jumping. Um, so sometimes you get great sims, sometimes you get poor sims, but they might be a great business. Just doing a bit of background searches on Google, Google the name of the business. Do they have great reviews? Do they have bad reviews? Obviously, if they're doing more commercial, they're not gonna have so much reviews online. And from there, if it's a very solid business, we'll try and get it to LOI as soon as possible, just because there are other sharks in the market as well, just like us. Um, to be completely honest, there's only been one case where I hadn't spoken with the broker just because for lack of time, and they denied our LOI because there wasn't a relationship yet. So what I do is when I send out the LOI and I haven't been able to speak with the broker for whatever reason, I call them and tell them, hey, I sent you an LOI. We're real. We're not just like a PE firm. And we have sent you the LOI so quickly because we are very interested in the business. We think, I kind of give props to the broker. I'll tell them you did a magnificent sim. Probably an intern did it. But they really like that. So it we don't shy away from sending LOI as soon as possible, just because in the past, we've gone to a table 2 days late and they'll tell us, no, we already have 4 other offers. So getting to LOI is extremely important. If you like it, go for it. But with that, send smoke signals or call the broker and tell them, listen, I'm doing this because I'm really interested, not because I'm tire kicker looking at all the deals and I just want to get into LOI as fast as possible.
How many deals are you looking at as it goes through the kind of the front level screening? How many deals are you looking at on a weekly basis?
It depends, to be quite honest. I think the beginning of the year it's a little bit slower just because people will take their business off the market just because they don't have their tax returns prepared. So I definitely feel like these three, this quarter is a bit slower. But I'm usually reviewing at least 20 to 25 sims a week. Of those, many are discarded. And that we have a very set criteria with Acquira. We usually look for businesses that have been established for more than 5 years, an EBITDA of more than 700 to or 750K. So our criteria kind of narrows down the inventory. Because I mean, if you look at inventory, I'll just give you a reference. I'm a part of Business Brokers of Florida, BBF here in Florida, which is like the Association of Brokers, kind of like the MLS for realtors. Prior to COVID, on that system, there was always anywhere around 4,000 businesses, 4,000, 4,200, 4,500 around there. After COVID, that went down to 2,000, and that has never gone up, like never. I check it weekly, just just for giggles, and that never goes up. So the inventory that is there out there of businesses is not great. It's not like houses like hey, I want to find a house in Miami. Even though they're extremely expensive, I can find, if I open up Zillow, I will find millions of houses for sale, or properties in general. Businesses is not so much. So if you think about it, of those 2,000 businesses, I want to say at least half of those are broke. They're just like asset sales. The business is not doing well. The owner wants to try and find someone that will take over, either because they have experience in the industry, or trying to find a sucker that will buy it from them, basically. So that leaves just the pool gets even smaller. And then you have to, if you're looking in one particular industry. I remember one time we were looking, there was a person that wanted to buy, like the UPS stores, like the mail. So I looked on the system, the whole entire state, there was only like 3 for sale.
Yeah.
Obviously with realtors, realtors that do both, like businesses and properties, you may find, deals on their system on the MLS. But on ours, there was only 3, which I thought was just insane. I thought, Florida's so big, I thought I would find maybe 10. So if you're looking for a very specific industry and you like the deal, you should definitely move forward because there's not much.
Well, let's, James, go ahead with your question that you've got. And if anybody's got questions, go ahead and put them in the, type them into to the message in here, and I'll ask Allie as we go forward. But go ahead with yours, and I got a couple afterwards as well, too.
Sure. So nice to meet you, Allie. I did meet you once before. I think you were on another call.
Yeah, I crashed Rich's call once just because I wanted to
Yes.
see.
So I'm under LOI, and I'm already, I mean, I see the writing on the wall, right? That the earnings are going to be lower than what he has represented, right?
Okay.
So I know there's going to have to be some sort of a retrade or some concession somewhere. So I guess I don't know if you've represented, buy side or is primarily sell side, but how do you see that as far as, let's say you're on the sell, you're representing the sell side, everybody sees the numbers, the QOV comes back, or the audit or whatever, we're looking at the numbers, we're like, okay, we're 300,000 less than what was represented because of XYZ or misallocated expense or a BS add back, whatever it is. How often, I guess my first question would be, how often does that just kind of like blow up everything? And then maybe like, what's the best way to go about that, right? Without trying to blow up the deal, right? Like, what is the best way to approach a seller, in your opinion, maybe, to come back to the table and be like, hey, listen,
So do they have a broker?
they do.
Okay. To be quite honest, I mean, if it blows up, that's probably better for you.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's
To be quite
either going to
honest,
blow up. Yeah. It's either going to blow up or he's going to have to come to the table. But yeah.
so
I don't want it to.
yeah, but the thing is that you can't be emotional about this because and I'm trying to say that you are emotional, but it's not. I've seen a lot of buyers that they try to find, they're just trying to close a business, their first business. They usually say their first business is the most difficult one, and I'm sure it's true. But in the essence of trying to close that first business, the hype, the emotion, you know, you you will miss a lot of things. I mean, and it's great that you're already seeing that that the quality of earnings is going to come down lower. If they're not really willing to budge, because I mean, I was that broker. I would represent buyers, and they would tell me, "Hey, I want to sell my business for 5 million." I thought it was a great business overall, operationally and such. But probably the business was 3 million. That was its worth. So I would tell them and push them, listen, let's put it in the market for 3 million if you really want to sell. And he's like, no, you know what? Let's put it for 5 million because that way buyers can make an offer. Somebody will come in with a $4 million offer. So I did that mistake early on where I actually put the business for market and it sat in the market for 2 years. I mean, one of them didn't even sell just because it was in the market for so long that the owner got a little bit older. He kind of slowed down things and the numbers started going down. If he would have sold at 3 million, he would have his 3 million in pocket rather than the 5 million that he wanted or 4 million. So that could be one case that the broker went along with what the owner wanted. Other case could be that the broker overpromised and probably wasn't educated in the industry or whatever. I think you said e-commerce. To be quite honest, I'm not that proficient in e-commerce, so I wouldn't be able to tell you what are the essence of it. So, but I'll give you an example. Like this week, one of the brokers that we're seeing for one of our AEs that we're actually negotiating the LOI, he put I think the price was either 4.7 or 4.5, and that was just outrageous. And sometimes you just have to take risks. We did our kind of our diligence beforehand instead of sending. We don't like to nickel and dime, so when it's possible, we'll just send an asking. Whatever they're asking, we'll send the LOI for that. But we took a risk, and we obviously the AE had a part in this. He was like, let's just do it. We sent an offer for 3.5 because his 4.5, 4.7, whatever it was, did not make sense whatsoever. When we did that, they actually opened up and they came back and we were like, they said, we'll do 4 and we'll offer $1.2 million in seller financing. With those numbers, then the deal worked. And we didn't, I mean, we usually ask for anywhere between 10 to 20% seller financing. So our seller financing and the LOI that we sent was much lower than, what I think ours was 350. They just sent 1.2. So sometimes you just have to take risks. In the case that you're already under LOI, you're going to go into due diligence. You also have to think about, you know, if you make him an offer and tell him like you have the proof, like listen, you promised me, let's say, 1 million, and it came back at 700. This is, even the multiple goes down at that point. Um, Anyone that goes into that deal is going to do the same due diligence that you did. So, if they wait for another buyer, they're just losing time. I would just put it that way. I could offer you this right now, or you could wait for someone else, go through the whole process that, buying a business, due diligence can take up to 6 months easily.
Yeah.
Especially with SBA. So,
Yes.
so
So with
just,
this,
yeah.
so I guess, and I kind of did have in the LOI where it's like, hey, we're offering this amount, right, based on this multiple, right, on stated financials, right? So like based on like this is the multiple, this is the earnings you're telling us it is, right? This is the working capital, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I just whenever it comes back and whatever that number is, I guess I just be like, okay, well, this is the new deal. Do we still have it? Like, I guess
It
yeah.
also
So
will
I mean,
depend on you.
it is a good multiple, and it is a good. So I mean, there's room here, right? So it's a good debt service coverage, and there's a lot of seller financing, right? So it's like it is a very good deal structure, right? But I can just already see it's going to be again 15% less, right?
I mean, at the end of the
Earnings.
day, James, we say this a lot. This is your deal. Even with
Yeah.
the AEs that are in Accelerator Plus, we have like some standards that we usually will advise or such. But then if their risk is a bit, greater, tolerance is a
Tolerance.
bit
Yeah.
greater than ours, go for it. That's not that doesn't mean it's a bad deal for us. It just, everybody has different risk tolerances. If at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is that you want to cover your debt service ratio. If the deal still makes sense at, the price that was negotiated beforehand, go for it. I personally think, we run into a lot of owners and brokers as well that want to negotiate so much on the LOI, like so much, and that's fine. But I think the real negotiating part falls on Rich probably, or the AE once they receive quarterly of earnings report. Just because what we put on the LOI is based on the knowledge that we have, based on the SIM, and whatever the broker wants to tell us, or whatever the broker wants to send us financials. So we have a very limited amount of information. We only know what we know, and we don't even know what we don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It might be that you need 6 months of working capital, and the broker did not put that in the sim. How are we supposed to know that? So I think the real negotiating starts, after QV.
So it's just a matter of he's willing to. I guess we'll just see if he's willing to come to the table because I like I said, I know for a fact it's going to come in lower. So I guess once we get those numbers, then it's just is he willing to negotiate? And I guess every seller's probably different as well, right? So I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if there was like a best way to approach it. Maybe if you had seen it, even from the buy side with Acquira, where it's like, you know, past maybe that is a rich thing. That might be a rich thing, as you said. Like
And,
once you get,
honestly, I mean, it would be on the richest face, but it's still on you, because it's
yeah,
still,
well, yeah, for sure,
it's
yeah.
not
I
rich's
mean, it's
decision. It's
yeah,
still
not
going
his
to depend
decision.
on what you
I just,
prefer.
yeah, I just meant like the best way to go about it, right? So I've never done it. I've never, obviously this is my first legit LOI, right? So I was under LOI once before, and before we could even finish quality of earnings, I got blown up on from his end. from the other
I
seller's
mean, I
end?
don't think there's a particular way of going about it. If you, I mean, at that point you have the QOV report.
Yeah,
You just
you
have
just
you
have
have
the
proof at
numbers.
that point.
Yeah, you just have
Yeah.
the numbers, and then it's a negotiation if he's willing to negotiate. That makes sense.
Well, and there's a couple things that are going on here that I think is important for everybody to understand. I talked to Hayden Miyamoto, our CEO, the other day, and there was a deal that he'd been looking at in Miami that was a large construction company for the last 6 months now. And post QOV, going through the diligence with Vipul Patel and Gaurav, our two outside counsels for financial, the decision was it's a no-go. And I'll tell you, talking to Hayden, it looked like somebody took his birthday away from him. I mean, I was talking to the top of his head the whole time. And here's a guy who does this a lot, and it's
Mhm.
still very emotional. But this is the beauty of numbers, quality of earnings reports come back. And that's what you have to hang your hat on. And that's where you can say, this is why these are so important to me, because this is what keeps me sane. It keeps me from doing things with my gut that my brain's telling me, no, don't be doing this because I'm in love with this deal and I'm going to go against what the numbers tell me. It's important to understand that, like Ali had said, we try to move to LOI quickly on good deals because we're going to go with what we're told, the limited amount of information we have, but the diligence table is where the deal is negotiated. The numbers that you put down on that LOI are absolutely open to negotiation all the way until the end of the deal. And the expectation is there, open to negotiation. Because if you determine that this deal ends up being much better than you think, and the seller wants something beyond what you had initially offered, I bet you're willing to say, okay, I'll do that because you want the deal. It's the same thing on the other side, though. If this comes back and you're told 1.2 for your seller discretionary, and QB comes back and says 900, that's a material change, and you're probably looking at something that's $1 million less than sales price. And you have to be able to say, seller, this is why QOV is so important to the process because the numbers are telling me this. Love the business, love what you've done, love everything about it. This, however, is a material difference. And remember this, you guys, you have SBA financing. Most everybody on here is going to use SBA financing. So in the end, they're going to say the same thing. This is not just you having to be the bearer of bad news to the buyer, or I'm sorry, to the seller. It's also saying, I'm not going to be able to get this financed. Nobody that's going to go through SBA, which is 99% of the people looking at this business beyond me, are going to get this to go through SBA financing at this price, with this level of debt service coverage and this level of SDE. So I'd love to get it done, but we got to find some place to meet on this.
Do sellers normally get access to, so in a situation like this, and you're like, okay, the QOV came back XYZ, do the sellers get that, like a copy of it, or do they
That's
normally see it, or
that's
like, is it,
yours. If
yeah,
you want to share that, you can. And if it helps,
Mhm.
if you believe it helps in the negotiation, you certainly can, but that's yours.
Right, because you're paying for it, and they don't,
Yeah.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
There were a couple questions that came in. One was, Ali, how do you handle the situation when the broker is intentionally waiting to get multiple LOIs?
I mean, it happens. I don't like these, but if it's a good business, you have to kind of work through it. And usually on those types of scenarios, what they're doing is they don't put a purchase price on the business. They're just waiting for offers, which I hate, to be quite honest, because maybe the owner is only looking for 2 million, and you go based on the earnings and offer 4 million. In those cases, I think you should just offer the best possible number for you, just because you don't know what's on the other end, and you don't want to be kind of working against yourself. If you lose the deal because somebody else gave a better number, well, it worked for them at that number.
Yeah,
But
that's an important thing, and that's exactly what we were just saying there. And Chris Mooney, who operates a capital fund, who's done this for his livelihood for many years and issued LOIs on literally thousands of deals, will tell you, don't overthink it, don't overcomplicate it, get to the table, get exclusivity, sit at the table, negotiate the deal. Listen, I don't want to offer something that's just astronomical that's going to just cause me problems. But if I know it's a good deal and there's all sorts of other people, I'll offer what it takes to get to the table and get exclusivity, because then we're going to be able to get to brass tacks, which is, what are we really looking at? What do you really want to do? And that's an important thing too. What does the seller actually need out of this deal? What do they actually want out of this deal? The structure of the deal. You might have a sales price, right? But the structure of the deal can change dramatically based on who that seller is and what they actually want. And you're not going to know that until you get to communicate with them. You know, Gloria can tell you that. She's been through a couple of deals here. The sellers, they're people. They vary. There may be somebody that has a real need for cash right now. There may be somebody that doesn't necessarily, and they'd be willing to take larger seller carries or some other kind of earn out or some unique deal structure. You're not going to know that till you get to the table. And that's where you get to, one, negotiate the deal, and to me, more importantly, sell yourself. That goes back to what we were talking about early on in the call. Some of you may not have heard it. You need to be able to sell yourself as the buyer of choice, not just the buyer who pays the most money, right? It's who's the steward of the business, who's going to take this thing forward. What are your intentions with this thing? Because if it's an equity fund that comes in and the intention is, I'm going to fire half of the people on day number one, a lot of sellers are going to take issue with that, right? And that's not what they're thinking about when they're hearing what this thing's going to sell for. When that bell goes off, suddenly it's like, oh, there's other things I need to think about. That is your job as a good buyer, is to make sure they are thinking about those other things, and you're presenting those, because it's more than the sales price. So when you've got a situation where there are brokers that are waiting, for multiple LOIs, it's usually a good deal, like Ali said. Be prepared to come in with something that gets their attention, and know that these are not binding contracts. This is the wild, wild west. This isn't even residential real estate, right? I mean, where people have money on the line and they lose their earnest monies. You pull out at any time at this on these deals. It's mind blowing to me, but that's the structure of the way this industry works. So you do want to be able to get to the table. Don't get yourself hung out to where you're offering $7 million on an obvious $3.5 million deal. But if it's going to take 4.2, you think, to get taken seriously, then get to the table.
Okay. Can I have a follow-up, Brian, on this? Yeah, because
Yeah.
that was the exact situation I was in. I was the first person in front of the seller. We had a good rapport. While we were negotiating and understanding the deal structure before official LOI, they did get the additional LOIs, 5 total. And because the broker set a deadline for that to happen, and mine was second best, but the first best, right, was way better. And I was thinking, like, did they just do that on purpose to lock in the deal exclusivity, and then they'll renegotiate the deal after the fact? Which sounds like what you recommend, right? Basically, just be aggressive, especially if it's a good business, be exclusive, and then, after QOE, we can renegotiate the deal, right?
Yeah, and
But so
I would ask this of Ali is, Ali, how much time as a broker do you want to spend communicating with somebody? How many calls do you want to take with no LOI? How much time do you want to spend with that person?
none, to be quite honest. It's just you lose so much time. And I understand why brokers do this. They'll ask for letters of intent just so they bypass this. Um, but in your case, so usually what the process is, they'll accept IOIs or LOIs, whatever they prefer, and then they'll give a certain time period. Let's say that they'll receive 10. Let's put a number, and
Yeah.
the best 3 they'll hold kind of like interviews. Did you have that chance or no?
Well, they called me and they told me about the other offers, and they asked me if I want to come back with to beat it or change the deal structure. But it was like the other 4 offers were very similar in some ways to mine, at least from the selling price, right? Valuation. But that first one was significantly higher. So I could not make the numbers work. So I decided to walk away from it. But I wonder if that's the strategy. Like,
Yeah, in
should I
some
come back
cases
higher
it's
just to,
definitely.
yeah.
So the thing is that what Brian said is true. The broker is kind of like the gate that you have to pass to be able to speak with the owner. If you're able to speak with the owner kind of get a sense prior to sending the LOI. Hey, what is it that you're looking for? We have this, we're having this exact scenario with another AE where we sent out IOI. The broker came back and told us, no, we're gonna hold off on presenting it until next week because that's when we're gonna receive all the rest. She had no idea that they had a timeline because the business we thought the business had been in the market for a significant amount of time already. So he told me, listen, should I the owner is a lady that has from like significant position in the community, like fundraisers, whatever, just networking. And he was like, before speaking with her, he said, do you think we should include in the IOI that she can keep that persona? But we haven't spoken to her. I told him, listen, maybe that's a great idea, but maybe it's not. Maybe what happens if she wants to retire 100%? She's so over going to networking events every night. Maybe she does love it, and that will be. So he was actually able to speak with the broker after we sent that out. And he told her, like, listen, he told the broker, listen, we're willing for her to keep that persona, in front of the business, so that. And the broker said, I think she would love that, So that that's a good idea. But what if it would have been the opposite? That would have just completely turned us away from the deal. So if you're not able to speak with the owner, speak with the broker. Get a sense of what the buyer wants. I usually, if they benchmark tends to do this a lot. They won't put a price. So I just call him, like, listen, what number are they looking for? What number are you looking for? Are we completely off? Like, maybe we're thinking a 3.5 multiple and they're thinking a 5. We're not even gonna waste our time on that, because if the numbers don't work anymore, then there's no sense of doing back and forth.
Yeah.
Ali brought up a good point right there. I've been involved in a couple of deals where long-term businesses where the name of the business includes the owner's name, right? It's James Wallbridge Siding. And I'll tell you that what you get to through negotiation is that there is a big part for these sellers that they don't want to admit because 99% of the time, this is the only business they've had. This is the only transaction they're going through with this. They're feeling, the imposter syndrome when you sit at the table and think, well, this is the first deal I'm negotiating. Well, guess how many they've done, right? I mean, they're dealing with the same type of thing, and they've got things that are on their mind that they want to express, but they're not sure whether they should. I'm playing poker here. How do I do this? What's going on? I'm just going to let my broker lead it. But I'll tell you, in those cases, what came up, because I asked the question specifically, is what's that going to be like for you walking down the street in your neighborhood, seeing that truck go by and somebody else own it? And it's always the same, nervous. That's my name. I want to make sure that whoever buys that business represents it and they do things the right way. That's important to me. So it's not getting as much money. You want to get paid well, but you want to make sure you've got the right buyer there. Yeah, absolutely. So don't forget that. Again, it doesn't even have to have their name. It's just their business. It's their baby for many of them. So knowing what it is, like we talked about, what they want, but understanding the dynamic of what they leave behind. Put yourself in a position to be the buyer of choice, because it's not all about money.
Yeah, 100%.
Another question on here is, what's the lowest debt service coverage ratio you would consider?
I think we have at 1.5. And I think that's, I mean, I've spoken with SBA lenders. I think theirs is based off the tax returns, 1.25. But for us, just to be safe, completely safe, we prefer 1.5.
Yeah, that would be right. And obviously, the higher you can get it, the better. I mean,
Yeah,
I really
definitely.
would like to see 1.7 or above most of the time. 1.5 would be the bare minimum on something.
Yeah. I mean, the higher it is, the better.
Over 2, how's that?
Yeah. 4 would be amazing.
Yeah. Here's another question. Given current interest rates, do you see more seller financing or other creative solutions to make DSCR work?
Yes, 100%. Sometimes you just have to get creative. We like to ask for seller financing, at least, range depending on the deal, between 10 to 20%. That could go even higher, if it, if the deal merits it. And then if that still doesn't help the DSCR, we'll ask for deferral, maybe a year, 2 years. Obviously,
Deferral meaning like interest only, or
yeah, I mean, you could pay them only interest only payments, but if you're able to defer all of it, obviously it's still going to accrue interest after that first year. But if you can defer it completely, then that's even better. But
Okay.
sometimes with owners, they'll feel a little bit more comfortable with interest only. That's fine. But
And what's the difference between
yeah,
like seller financing and earnouts, and any limitations with SBA?
I think in regards to, and Brian might be able to answer this one much better than I can, but I think in regards to seller financing, it's seen as equity. I'm not sure in regards to SBA. I'm not sure
Okay.
if earnout is seen as equity in regards to SBA. Earnout, obviously, they're not, they're very, I don't want to say easy to get out of, but if the business for whatever reason, you put the criteria that you want to meet, if the company doesn't meet it, then you don't have to pay that earnout.
And there's flexibility now in the changes that have come for SBA. That was never really an option. It is now. They're not going to call it an earnout. That's really not what it is or how they structure it, but there's the potential for that. You're also going to run into situations on seller financing where strong seller counsel is going to want to securitize it some way. Yeah, hey, you're coming in to buy this business at $4.2 million. It's a plumbing company. You're not a plumber. You don't have any experience in running it. You want my seller to take on $1 million worth of note. So you're really only giving them $3 million and you want them to bank on you. How are we going to secure this? I mean, they're not really willing to do it. I probably wouldn't be willing to do it. I'd want some kind of security to it. So that's something that can come up as well too. You have to understand that to some extent. It doesn't necessarily, but you're going to have some competent counsel that's going to go down this road and want to, address that a little bit. That's just an FYI. I wouldn't complicate yourself on it. Cross that bridge when you come to it, but understand that could be something that does come up. But there is a lot of seller financing. We do try to press it. But again, I want to say this because we had some changes on this just in structurally how we're offering, is that we were pretty much standard trying to press larger seller carries and we were losing some deals. And the bottom line was we were running counter to what we've been talking about, which is get to the table, right? So if it comes meaning let's not even mess with seller financing, that's a question you should be able to ask a broker. How amenable is this seller to any kind of seller carry? Yeah, they'd take a look at it. Absolutely not. It's a deal killer. Good to know. Doesn't mean we still might not do seller financing once we get to the table because I may structure it differently, right? To what we're talking about here.
And I don't think, I mean, I remember when I joined the team, we were being a little bit more aggressive with the seller financing, like Ryan said. But I think we reduced it to 10%, and we haven't had that much pushback on it, to be quite honest. I don't think we've had, everybody knows the interest rates are extremely high. I mean, on the seller side, they also want to sell their business, so they want to get this deal done. So if 10% is what's going to take, they're not extremely opposed to it. They might not like it, but they'll accept it.
There's another
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to, so my deal specifically has 2 seller notes. So I actually have a full standby note, and then I also have a contingent note. So the contingent note is the quote unquote SBA eligible earnout, right? So the catch there with that is that it can't be based on future earnings, right? So it can't be based on them attaining a higher number, right? And then getting a higher like valuation, essentially. The valuation has to be based on the appraisal, right? So you can't pay more for the business, right, than what it would appraise for, right? But you can pay full price and then have a section of it in the seller note be contingent on maintaining historical numbers, right? So mine, for example, is it's like 17% and it's or 20% and it's contingent on maintaining top line revenue, right? And I've talked with multiple lawyers and I was like, is there any standard way to do this? And they're like, nope, absolutely no standard way to do this. They're like, everyone's different, as far as the criteria and the forgiveness portion. And like, is it on top line? Is it on bottom line? Is it quarterly? Is it a balloon after a year and the whole thing's forgiven? It's like, it is completely up for interpretation. But the SBA eligible and so basically the way I was able to get my deal done was I gave him his price, right? So he had a price and I was like, okay, I'll get to your price, right? But this is the only way I can get there, right? And it's got to be this much cash at close, this much seller financing, this much on standby, right, to keep my debt service coverage right. So if a seller has a number in his head, right, and you don't think that he can get it, but if the business maintains, let's say it's based off of last year's earnings, right? Let's say they valued the whole business just on last year, right? And it's a bang out year. It'd be like, okay, seller, I'll give you that price based on last year, but the business has to maintain that year, right? And if it doesn't, then you're going to get less, right? And it's probably going to be closer, the amount of the seller note is probably going to be closer that if you didn't pay it on the average of without that year, right? And that's kind of how I structured it, right? So
say that one more time. So if they don't hit that number, then how do you calculate that?
So if you just take the seller note, right? Let's say you take it away, then what is that multiple, right? So what is the multiple on the deal minus that if you just didn't have to pay the seller note, right? So let's say, for example, let's say the business did 1.5 million last year, and you're offering them 6 million, right? And he wants 6 million. You're like, okay, I'll give you 6 million. But let's say every year prior to that, they did about 1 million, right? So, okay, you're going to give him his 6 million if we keep doing at least the 1.5 million, right? Earnings or top, however you want to do it, right? And so then I would have the seller note be 2 million, right? Or close to it, maybe 1.5 million, right? So then if you don't hit that, right, and you don't have to pay the 1.5 million seller note, well, then you're paying 4.5 million for a million SD, or you're paying, 4 million for a million SD. You're paying a reasonable multiple if that seller note goes away, right?
To be quite honest, I'm going to say a very personal opinion. If you're jumping through so many hoops, to make this work, maybe it's not the best business for you. Because what happens, if you get to that point where, there's an earn out or whatever, the criteria, is not met, and the business owner has a sour taste in his mouth, and then goes to your employees and, starts bad mouthing you. It just so many things that you need to think of that, aside from money, there's, just relationships in line as well. I don't mean to say that, getting creative is not the way to go. Definitely get creative. But if, if there's so many things that you need to make the owner happy, I mean, push back. You're also, they're doing you kind of like a favor of selling, their great business, but you're also doing them the favor of, being able to retire. Is so, and that usually that negotiation should happen, once you get the QE, not prior. Like we have said this whole entire call for LOI. If you want to promise rainbows, and you think you could do it, go for it. that's not you should definitely push it. But once you get that QV and you have a better sense of the business and what you can expect, if they've only had one good year at 1.5 SDE, in the past years, like James said, it was 1 million. Do you really think that will be able to maintain if all their previous years are at 1 million?
Well, and that's the nice place, like what James is talking about structuring is having, Lee Loman had just said this as well too, structured as a forgivable seller's note. There's ways to structure it that just says, hey, if you don't meet these, you can do it. And that kind of creativity does make sense because it speaks again back to the core thing that we're discussing, which is understand the seller and what they want out of this. When you were discussing this, you know what I was thinking? It made it sound like you were the F&I guy at the car dealership, and the seller came in and had a number in his mind. I'm not going to pay more than $525 a month for my monthly payment. And you're like, have I got a deal for you?
They
Right?
love that. They love it when you come in with a payment number.
That's
Great.
right.
We'll stretch it out over 96 months. No
That's right.
problem.
And that's the creative solution. I can meet you on that all day long. Thank you for supplying that number. I understand what's important to you now. So we'll move this thing forward because I can definitely get you at 525 a month, right? So and I don't want to, frame it that way. I did that facetiously, but the point is this: understand the requirements and the needs of the seller. Because if this guy comes to the table and I am stuck on $6 million, that is just, listen, and the broker tells you under his breath, the guy just wants $6 million. I couldn't tell. I mean, it's just, I don't know what it is. Something, he's got it tattooed on the inside of his palm. That's just where he's at.
It's for the golf course.
Right. So that's where you may have to get creative. And it may be something that says, yeah, I'm willing to do that, just like you said, as long as we're able to continue to hit these kind of numbers. If not, then no. And maybe that's where you get the guy. This is another change with SBA. Maybe that's where the guy stays on because he's a monster in business development. You'll see this a lot of times. If you start to sit at tables, you're going to find out that what happens for a lot of sellers is that they'll say, listen, here's the bottom line on this, James. I love the day-to-day out in the field. I can't stand dealing with the staff and the problems around HR. Drives me nuts. People not showing up to work, having to fire people, having to hire people, having to train people, having to take care of all the administrative stuff because I don't have somebody strong in that. It's killing me. And right then and there, I put somebody in place to take care of it. That's one of the things that's really obviously going to help me because it's a pain point. But perhaps this guy can stay on and do a bunch of the work that he enjoys doing and help to drive this business forward. I'll just eliminate all this off of his plate because here's what's really happening is what you want to be able to say if you're a helpful person right away is, geez, seller, why don't you just hire somebody to do that stuff for you? Right? And then is that why you're selling it? Really? But you'll run into this oftentimes. So it is listening to find out what's actually going on. And I can't stress that enough. You really need to ask questions to discover why they're selling the business. What is it that they want to do with their life going forward? What is the reason that they're trying to do it now? What's happening? What are the dynamics? Understand who this person is. Quickly develop some type of relationship with them where you can get down to the reality of what's actually happening quickly. Having a high level or developing a high level of emotional intelligence is paramount to being successful in this. Because if you're going to sit there and just talk numbers back and forth, remember who you're doing this with. If it's a plumber on the other side of the table, probably the wrong person. Their eyes are going to glaze over and you're not developing any kind of rapport with them whatsoever. You are nothing more than a number at that point. But if you can develop something else that is more of a direct personal relationship and uncover their desires and their needs and their wants out of this, then you've got the opportunity to do something. And perhaps you can structure something very creative because it'll make sense to them now. They're listening to what you're saying because you are listening to what they're saying and you're trying to find some way to meet in the middle. Lee, actually, jump on and say a little bit about what's going on. You were talking about having to PG a seller note and whatnot, and having to, term this thing as forgivable. Give a little input on what you had to do there. Or is Lee still here? Let's see. No, he is. Well, or he had to jump to the restroom. Maybe he's not listening. Anyway, we'll catch him if he comes back on it. Ali, I had a question for you real quick as well on here. What differentiates a good buyer from a bad buyer to a broker? How do you make yourself stand out quickly on those initial calls?
You know, I I think just being prepared. If you're trying to buy a $5 million business, if you have your SBA pre-approval letter, if you have, sometimes they'll ask for a separate approval funds. If you know the industry, if you ask like the correct questions, I think they will separate you from someone that calls and says, "Hey, I just want to sign your NDA. Can you get me over the SIM?" That's it. If you have a buyer profile as well, that works wonders. Just I I know personally, I think it's a bit annoying to have to prepare all of that, but it's what's going to set you apart from other buyers.
I think that's a great point. If you haven't prepared some type of one-page buyer profile, I would strongly encourage you to do that.
Yeah.
This is who I am. This is my background. This is why I'm seeking this type of business. This is what I'm looking to do with it. This is my ethos. This is who the seller is getting to steward the business going forward.
Sometimes,
Because
you'll ask for the NDA and you send back the NDA signed. And if you could attach all those documents to the email, I'm sure you'll get an answer really quick.
yeah, that's a good point. Another one is, what does a broker think of getting an LOI immediately? You had talked about that. Is this good or bad? Is this something where they look at it and say, this person's just jerking my chain, they haven't had enough time to look at it? Or do they view that as this is somebody who's serious and I take them seriously?
I think it's going to depend on the broker. Some brokers are, they just want to be kind of anal about it, and they want to establish a relationship, and that's fine. I personally, what I do is, try to call them prior. Obviously, brokers never answer their phone, so I'll leave a voicemail. After, you know, if I wasn't able to speak with them at some point, and on that call, I'll say, listen, we're actually very interested in this business. How do you want to go about it? Do you want, should we schedule a call with the owner? Should we send you some questions? Should we send an IOI? Should we send an LOI? And I tell them I'm trying to respect the process. Some brokers won't accept, a buyer to speak with the owner before receiving an LOI. Great, we'll send it. Um, Usually, if we haven't been able to speak with the broker at all, then probably an IOI is better. That way, you get some you could present that you're serious, and the next step would be to speak with the owner. At the end of the day, I think the you should be you should try and speak to the owner as quickly as possible if you like the business. The broker is just firewall. How do you get past that?
Have a good set list of diligence questions. You don't want to or need to get into the weeds. I would encourage your diligence questions to be more universal and probably geared more towards the questions that I've been phrasing. Why are you looking to sell your business? What do you love about your business? What will you miss about your business? What's most important to you on the deal structure? Get a handful of a half dozen questions that engage you with that seller quickly on it, so that it's not necessarily just this fire hose of financial analysis. Certainly, you're going to have some questions specific to the deal on that, but I would encourage you to have a handful that can begin to develop that relationship at a more base level very quickly on this. And I'm going to go with one last assumption here, that everybody on this call is looking to actually buy a business. That's why we're here. So do not be afraid to get to LOI. Do not be afraid to put something together and get to the diligence table. Because there are a lot of deals that come through for first-time people on this call, people that have been through the accelerator for years, that they miss out on a lot of deals because they're really trying to get everything figured out beforehand. They ask a lot of questions and then the deal goes away, or they're just not quite there. They want to structure it exactly right because they're nervous because I've not done it before. Get to the table.
Yeah, I mean, on some deals, there was a process that I would do. Read the same, and I'll start. I would ask like 10 questions about that I want to understand better. But then we noticed that you know, if it's a great business, once we send back those questions to get those questions answered, it could take up to a week. By the time that, you know, the broker finally did answer back to us, or probably they never even answered back, and we, you know, reached out to the broker and asked them, hey, can you answer our questions? Oh no, it already went under LOI. So I think it's just going to depend on the business. If you feel it's a great business, you know, try to get to LOI as quickly as possible. If you think it's a business that, you know, you're not completely 100% on it, or you're just unsure of, well, you know, maybe go ahead and ask those questions before sending an LOI. It's going to be very case by case.
So we're kind of wrapping up towards the end here. Has anybody else got any questions they want to ask?
Maybe one quick question, and I'm not sure. So this is kind of almost related to Mindaugas's question, where just before this deal, there was another deal that I pursued pretty heavily. It was a no asking price deal. I hate these deals, but no asking price, and I caught it kind of right when it hit the market. Got my offer in quick. And then I just got kind of stalled, right? And it was a really good offer. I mean, my debt coverage was lower than I probably would have been comfortable with otherwise, but it was a very interesting opportunity. So I put in a super competitive offer, and they were just like, well, you're the first one, right? We got to kind of wait and see how this goes, right? You know, so like basically you're the first one in, right? With no asking price. There's really nothing you could do there, right? I guess, or, you know, if they don't have an asking price in mind, and they see your offer and they're not just like slamming the, you know, I don't know if the broker was sidelining it or if it was the sellers, right? And I don't know if you've dealt with that. You probably Main Street
Well,
normally
if
there's
they
an asking
kind of
price.
when they kind of put you on pause to try and get more offers, I would just be very persistent, you know, week after week. Hey, what's going
Just
on?
just keep hitting them. Hey, get
Yeah.
an offer yet? Did you get a
No,
better
as in
offer?
like what's your status? Are you still, you know, do you have a date of when, you know, a set date of when you'll close like the IOIs that you want to receive?
Gotcha. So that makes sense. So just
Or a
keep on them until they tell
price,
you to go away.
yeah, or is there a price or a structure that I'm missing
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
I mean,
Gotcha.
if I have a feeling that if I'd given you the right price and the right structure, we'd be under LOI right now. So I've missed. Where have I missed?
And I actually directly asked that. I was like, okay, so they reacted that, well, we're, you know, they haven't gotten any other offers was basically the thing. So they hadn't got any other offers, so they didn't know how good my offer was, right? So, and I was like, so do they have an offer? You know, so okay, how do I, you know what I mean? So, and I think it was just a waiting game. I did follow up with them a couple times, and then I just stopped and found another opportunity. But so I guess that's right. Just kind of keep on them until they kind of tell you to go away or tell you that it's sold for
And if
higher
maybe
or something.
while they're waiting for other LOIs, maybe request a call with the seller. Just, hey, I want to introduce myself. You know,
Yeah,
I
and
think
we
that
did. I didn't submit an offer until I met him. I
okay.
didn't.
So
Yeah,
you
it
actually
was
did
just
everything right, but then
You
just the
may have had
broker
a
was
yeah, or you may have had a seller to Ali's point who wanted 7.3 million, and the broker knows that they're out of their mind, right?
yeah.
yeah, that's it.
Or they don't know what they want, or who knows, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they were
That
just testing the market. Who knows?
I'll
I'm not
say
sure.
something that you know, sometimes sellers will get very nitpicky about the LOI terms and such. It's come to a point where sometimes I'll kind of play chicken with them, as in, hey, why didn't you, you know, we obviously send our LOI, but I'll tell the broker, can you please, you know, prepare an LOI that your seller will sign and send it to us, and we can see if we can accept those terms or not. There was a case where, you know, the seller went with his attorney. They prepared an LOI and they sent it unsigned. I told the broker, please have your seller sign it. You know, this is your LOI. Have him sign it. You know, if he's 100% on board with this structure, these terms, why, you know, and he got into no because the buyer needs to sign it first. I'm like, no, that's just listen. We had been negotiating at that point for like about 4 or 5 months. I was like, just have him sign it. We would appreciate very much if you would sign it, and then we can, you know, see. He came back three weeks later and he was like, I can't get my seller to sign it. just
You're gonna
because he
resign the
didn't want
LOI
to sell, he didn't want to sell his business. This is just BS. You know, they want some glory or whatever, you know, seeing that they have different types of buyers, but at the end of the day, they're too tied up into their business. And that's you know, their whole life. They probably don't want to sell it. They probably think they should sell it because they want to retire, you know, and that's fine. I remember that that this son in particular, his daughter had just had like a baby or something. So I imagine, you know, he had all the components for him to sell his business. He just didn't want to sell it.
Yeah, he thought he wanted to, and yeah.
Yeah,
So
and then when it came down to it, he was not willing to sell
yeah,
it.
my
Or
seller. So these guys were younger, like 40, right? So it was already kind of like, what are you guys gonna do after this, right? I actually asked them in the seller call. I was like, so what do you guys are too young to go sit on the beach for the rest of your lives. Like, what are you gonna do? But so they were like, oh, we're de-risking our blah blah blah, our whole net worth's tied up in this thing, et cetera, which I respected. But yeah, they just probably weren't ready, and that's probably gonna happen, especially when there's no asking price. They don't even know
Yep,
what they want.
that makes sense. Well, hey, we actually ran over a little bit, so if anybody's got any additional questions, I'm sure feel free to reach out to Allie. You know, she's probably willing to answer a couple questions after the fact if anything comes up. But otherwise, Allie, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, and I hope you guys got something out of this. Again, if nothing else, get to LOI, get to the table, figure it out from there. If it doesn't work out, you just did nothing but gain experience. Gloria's going to tell you that. She's been through this a couple times now. She's a monster at this now. She knows what she wants, she knows how to ask it, and it all comes through experience of doing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have any questions, I am on Slack channel. I sometimes miss messages, so if I don't respond quickly, please have some patience, just because I don't see them. But thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. All
Have a
right.
nice weekend.
See you,
Take care.
everybody.